Today on our 2013 Ford Taurus, we're going to be taking a look at and installing the Roadmaster EZ2 baseplate kit, part number 524429-1. So here's what our baseplate looks like fully installed. It's going to allow us to tow our vehicle behind our motorhome, and it's going to sit just right in the grooves of our grill here. Now we are going to need to cut out a little bit, and when we're not towing our vehicle, we can actually remove the brackets, and it's not that noticeable. Our base plate is compatible with quick disconnects and all Roadmaster tow bars. Now they are an all steel construction with a nice black powder coat finish that's going to not only hide the bar nice behind your grill, but it's also going to protect it against rust and corrosion. Now this is a custom kit made for your vehicle. Now that we've gone over some of the features, let's show you how we get it installed. So here's everything our base plate is going to come with. Now, it doesn't include any thread locker, but we're going to need to pick some up because we're going to have to apply them to all our bolts. And I like to do that before I start anything else. That way it has a little bit of time to set up. Now, if you don't have any Loctite or thread locker, you can pick some up on our website using part number LT37420. Now, we don't need a whole lot, but we're just going to put a small amount on each one of our bolts. And we're going to let it set up. That way we're not having Loctite, thread locker all over our hands or running off the bolt when we get ready to put them in. To begin our installation, we're going to open up our hood, and we're going to need to remove the 4 bolts that are holding down the cover right here, right above our radiator. And I'm going to be using a 10mm socket to remove those. Now, right behind our hood latch, on either side, we're going to have 2 push pin fasteners we're going to need to remove also. Now I'm just going to be using a flathead screwdriver. We're going to pop the center up, and then we're able to grab it. We can kind of wiggle it around. We can grab underneath the clip, and it'll come right out. Now if we move to the front of our wheel well, we're going to have 3 5.5mm bolts holding our fender liner to our fascia. And then we're also going to have a plastic fastener right here at the corner. Now I'm going to be using a 5.5mm socket to remove the bolts. Now the plastic fastener here, I'm going to pull my fender liner away a little bit. I'm going to take a flathead screwdriver and go ahead and pop it out. We're going to pop out the center section, and then we should be able to pull the outer section out. Now we're going to repeat that process on the other side as well. Now if we come underneath our vehicle, we're going to find the splash shield right here. In our subframe, we're going to need to remove the 5 plastic fasteners that are attaching it to our subframe, as well as the 1 bolt that's going to be attaching our fender well to our splash shield. Now, to remove that bolt, I'm going to be using an 8mm socket. And we're going to remove the other side as well. Now, with these plastic fasteners, it's easiest to take a Phillips screwdriver, and if you take out the center section first, sometimes you need to hold the outer section still, put a little pressure on it. If we get the center section loose and out a little bit, we can go in and grab it, and it should release our clip. We'll be able to pull it out. Now we're going to pull those out for all the remaining clips holding our splash shield on. Now with an extra set of hands, we're going to start to remove our fascia. We're just going to come to the corner and start slightly pulling away. Now we're going to need to disconnect our fog lights. So there's a small tab right here at the bottom. We're going to squeeze that tab, and we can disconnect our fog lights. Now we're going to put our fascia aside for safekeeping, that way it doesn't get damaged. Now with the fascia fully off, if we come back underneath the vehicle, just right in front of our subframe here, we're going to have 2 clips on the bottom. So I'm going to take my needle nose pliers, and I'm going to squeeze and then bring that forward so I can release it. We'll do the same thing on the other clip. Now we're going to have one on top, so we can go back up top, squeeze the clips, and remove it. And that top one's going to be right in front of our hood latch, right in the middle of the center. So again, we'll just squeeze it, and we can slide it right off. Now we're going to have two bolts that are holding our louver housing on. And I'm going to be using an 8mm socket to remove those. Now on the bottom here, on each side, we're going to have one push pin fastener holding our louver housing on. We're going to take a flathead screwdriver and pop it out. Now we'll go ahead and remove the other one as well. Now we come to where we just took that bolt out. We're going to have our ambient temperature sensor right here. We're just going to lift up, we'll be able to disconnect it from our louver housing. Then if we come over to the side, on the passenger side here, we're going to have a clip holding it onto our bumper beam. We can go ahead and remove that as well. Just take a flathead screwdriver and pop the clip out from the bumper beam. We can just set this aside for right now. Now the only thing holding our louver housing on now is going to be these two clips on top. We're going to come up to them and we're just going to squeeze them, and that'll release the clip. Then we can pull our louver housing off and again set it aside for right now. Now on each side we're going to have 4 bolts that are going to be holding our bumper beam in place. I'm going to be using a 13mm socket to remove those. Now I do want to mention this is not getting reinstalled, but we're going to keep our hardware in the bumper beam in case we ever need to take our base plate off. Now on our application, if yours has these 2 small tabs right here, we're going to need to drill those out because those are actually factory tack welds and we're not going to be able to pull the bumper beam away. Now the drill bit I'm going to be using is just going to be just big enough to drill through that tack weld. Now we're going to repeat that for all the remaining tack welds on our bumper beam. After drilling, you may need to pry it away from the bumper a little bit. Just using a pry bar, just kind of wiggling it back and forth, see if it'll let go. With our bumper beam removed, I'm going to put a small amount of Loctite on all the bolts that were holding it in place because we're going to be reusing these bolts to put our base plate on. Now with an extra set of hands, we're going to put our base plate in place. Again, I'm going to be using that 13mm socket to snug these up. And we'll go snug up all the remaining hardware as well. Now we're going to take our support brace here, and we're going to be attaching it with these 2 holes on the bottom of our main brace. The way you're going to know you have the right one is this tab here. When you have the 2 holes facing towards you, you're going to want this tab to go towards the center of the vehicle. And we're actually going to put a spacer in between our brace here and our support brace. And we're going to feed our bolt through just like that with our bracket in place. Now we're going to come back and put a 1/2-inch lock washer and finally a 1/2-inch nut on the bolt. Now we're going to leave this pretty loose for right now so we can get the rest of our hardware in place. Now coming from the bottom, we're going to take another one of our shorter 1/2-inch bolts and we're going to feed it through both ends of the holes in our bracket. Now with those loosely in place, we're going to follow it up with 1/2-inch lock washers, and then we're going to come back with a 1/2-inch nut. Now we're going to repeat that same process on the other side as well. Now if we bring our attention right here, our air deflector in front of our radiator is going to be making contact with our base plate. So we are going to need to trim a small bit here, and we're going to need to trim on our louvers. Now I'll go ahead and draw it out and show you how we're going to trim it. Here on our air deflector, I'm just going to make a small cut right above and below my base plate here, so that way it has enough room to come back out and it won't be making contact. Now I'm just going to be using a rotary tool to cut some of this plastic away. Now we're going to take our louver housing, and we're going to move the louvers out of the way of our bracket below. We're just going to get it roughly in place, just enough to support itself so we don't have to hold it. If we come to our driver's side over here, we're going to trim out this small section right here that I have marked. Now, again, I'm just going to be using a rotary tool. I just want to remind everybody to be extra careful when you are cutting this out. Now we can move over to the other side, and we'll have some trimming to do there as well. Now here on the passenger side, if we come to where our louvers have this push pin fastener, we're just going to cut out this square section right here. Now if we come to the back of our louver housing, we're going to pay attention to the bottom section of it, and using a flathead screwdriver, I'm going to come to the 4 tabs here. I'm going to pop those out of that center hinge. And once we have those popped out, we're going to go ahead and remove the lower section of our louvers. We're going to be removing the 4 louvers here. So if we just take our louvers here, and we go ahead and grab them and push straight, and then can pop right out of the center section. We'll do that for all of them. Then we can take it by one end and we can pop them out. Now we're going to be removing the 4 lower ones, but we're going to leave the upper ones in place. Now once you have all those removed, we can go ahead and put this back in place. Now our louver housing, we're not going to have the threaded holes that we did before, but our base plate has a bracket that we're going to be using. Now we're going to take our 1/4-inch bolt that's supplied in our kit and a washer, and then we're going to feed it through, come back with another washer and a 1/4-inch lock nut. And that's how it's going to be fully attached, and how we'll be attaching our sensor back to our louver housing. So we can take our ambient temperature sensor, we're going to line it up with the hole in our bracket, and again, 1/4-inch bolt with a flat washer. We're going to go through the housing, the bracket, and through our base plate, then come back with a flat washer and the lock nut on the back side. I'm going to come back and tighten these up using a 7/16 socket and wrench. I'm going to repeat that for the other one as well. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to snug up all my hardware before I give it the final torquing amount. Now, using a 3/4-inch wrench and socket, I'm going to torque down all my 1/2-inch hardware to the specified amount in the instructions. And we're going to repeat that for all the remaining hardware. Now in the back of our instructions, they do provide us with a template that we're going to need to trim out so we can gain access to our base plate and hook everything up. Now I cut it out, and it's going to go right here on the outside of the honeycomb grill. And I cut the center section out. I'm just going to trace along the line that I cut out here. Then I'm going to take my template and I'm going to move it over to the other side, and we'll trace that out too. Now using a rotary tool with a cutting bit, I'm going to cut out this section that I just drew out. Now we can always come back and clean up the edges and trim a little bit more if we need to. But now that this side's cut out, we can go ahead and move to the other side and cut that out as well. Now if you're going to be using wiring or a supplemental braking system, now that we have our fascia off, now would be a good time to put it on. So I'm going to be using this bracket here. It's a universal mounting bracket. And if you don't have one, you can pick one up on our website using part number 18136. Now I'm just going to mount this to the bottom of my base plate here. That way I can mount my breakaway switch. So I just wrap this tie around the base plate. I'm going to come back and using a 5/16 nut driver, I'm going to tighten it down. Now when we get ready to mount our breakaway switch, it does need to sit pretty low. So I'm going to take my bracket and I'm actually just going to bend it down a little bit, and we can line up wherever I need it to. Now that we got our bracket sitting where we want, I'm going to take a drill bit and I'm going to drill a hole so I can mount my breakaway switch. I can go ahead and take my breakaway switch, line up the holes, and take a Phillips head screwdriver. I'm going to drop down from the top, making sure it goes through my bracket and the switch, and then follow it up with a lock washer and nut. Now the hardware I'm using I just had laying around. You can use pretty much any hardware you have, you just want to make sure that it's nice and secure and it's not going to fall off. Make sure everything's nice and tight. Now we can get ready to put our fascia back on. Now at the back of our breakaway switch here, we're going to have a plug. Now we're going to need to run this wire up to the cabin of our vehicle. Now before I connect this, I'm going to put a little bit of dielectric grease in there. Now if you don't have any, you can pick some up on our website using part number 11755. And that's just going to help keep the moisture and corrosion from building up inside our connection. I'm just going to take a little bit, put it on each side of my connector, and we can go ahead and plug it in. Now we can start routing this up towards the engine. I'm actually going to go right behind my base plate here. I'm going to come in right behind my headlight on the inside of my engine bay. Pull all the excess wire out, and we can leave this up here for right now. Now, before we put our fascia back on, I'm going to put a little bit of electrical tape around my connector here for my breakaway switch, just to help protect it a little bit more, and it's going to help hide the wires and just give us a little bit better of a connection. We don't have to worry about anything building up inside. Now I'm just going to take a few zip ties. I'm going to secure my breakaway switch wire that I ran up through my engine. I'll secure it to the back of my base plate, and we don't have to worry about any heat from the radiator or anything else coming up and damaging it. Just put a few zip ties along the way to help keep it put in place. Now with an extra set of hands, we can reinstall our fascia. It's going around all of our brackets. Now we can begin to replace all the fasteners that we removed earlier. Now the last step is put our bracket in place. We're going to take it to the flat pieces on the top and the bottom. We'll slide it in, and we're going to rotate it to the side, and we'll lock it into place. I'm going to go ahead and do that for the other one as well. Now we can come up to our base plate, and we're going to remove the pins. We'll do that for both sides. We can take the end of our tow bar here with the eyelet, and we're going to put it into our base plate here. We can take our pin, making sure we go all the way through our tow bar. And put the safety pin in place. I'll go ahead and hook up the other side as well. With our tow bar hooked up, I'm going to go ahead and hook up my safety cables. What I like to do with these is wrap it around to take up some of the extra slack. That one installed, we can go and get the other one in place too. Now that everything's hooked up, I'm going to go ahead and clip on my breakaway cable to my switch here. I'm going to run this all the way to the hitch on my RV. Just going to feed it down through my safety chain loop and come back and hook it onto itself. And that'll finish up our look at the Roadmaster EZ2 base plate kit, part number 524429-1 on our 2013 Ford Taurus.
Click the link below to shop, learn more, or visit us at etrailer.com.